This week, Caitlin Clark put herself in the history books, but this is only the beginning for the Iowa Guard. Welcome back to the Saturday edition of Locked On Women's Basketball, the internet's only women's basketball draft-focused podcast. Today, we'll break down Clark's WNBA draft prospects.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Welcome. You are Locked On Women's Basketball. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. My name is Hunter Cruse. I'm your Saturday host covering the WNBA draft and prospect scouting. I'm joined by my host, Lincoln Shafer. Lincoln is our biomechanics guru and contributes to our WNBA draft coverage at The Next. Em couldn't make this episode. We sent her on a trip to scout some Canadian prospects, but she'll be back next episode. But last summer, we set up an entire historical series for the main reason of that series was to see where Caitlin Clark ranked among the best prospects ever. And for you, Lincoln, after doing that series, going back and watching a bunch of other old prospects, where does Caitlin stand for you, and why is she such a elite prospect?
So for me, she's in the somewhere in the range of the fourth best prospect of all time to the sixth best prospect of all time in the WNBA era, but she's far and away the best guard prospect in maybe the history of women's basketball. She's a singular scorer and passer. In the Her Hoop Stats database, which is since 2009, there are 4 seasons in which a player averaged 20 points per game, 7 assists, and 7 3-point attempts per game. Would you like to guess what those are?
Who the seasons are?
Yeah, so there's 4 seasons of 20 points per game, 7 assists, and 7 3-point attempts per game.
Was Sabrina one of them?
No, it's Caitlin Clark freshman year, Caitlin Clark sophomore year, Caitlin Clark junior year, and Caitlin Clark senior year. It's ridiculous what she does. If you took away her handle and her passing, she'd be one of the best shooting prospects we've ever seen. If you took away her shooting, she'd be one of the best pure point guards we've ever seen. I've run out of things to say about Caitlin Clark's offensive game. It's absurd. She's averaging almost 33 points per game. 2 nights ago, she dropped 49, which is an Iowa program record, and had 8 assists at halftime. Like, she's just an absolutely absurd offensive engine.
And she's also, here's some stats for some of these numbers. 39% on catch and shoot threes, 41% on pull-up threes. She's also a 64% finish from the half court, and she's doing this on a 40+% usage. She has one of the largest offensive loads in the country, and one of the biggest misconceptions with Clark is that, she's a shot chucker. She's inefficient. She's actually one of the most inefficient players ever. If you account for the usage,
yeah.
You account for the usage.
The scoring that she does at volume, at the efficiency she does, it's absurd. And Calvin Wetzel of Her Hoop Stats tweeted last year that Caitlin Clark had 67 unassisted 3-pointers last season, which led the nation. It was actually not only first among players, but it was more than any other team in college basketball. No other team as a whole made as many unassisted 3-pointers as Caitlin Clark by herself. And offensively, she is maybe the best transition passer I've ever seen at any level of the sport. She just creates opportunities for teammates constantly in transition. She had at least 3 passes in transition against Michigan on Thursday night that made me just kind of I frequently find myself watching Caitlin Clark just throwing up my hands in disbelief and just like, what do you do? What do you do with that? She's an elite shooter. She's still making 39% of her threes this season, 39.9 even, which is, for her shot diet, she's taking almost 14 threes a game. her shot diet is incredibly difficult, and it's just consistently scoring at a high rate. I don't know what to do with her offense.
Do you have any worries about her scaling down her role at all? Like from a
No,
usage standpoint, she's all no concerns at all with that.
not really. Like, she made Monica Sonano an 18-point a game scorer who couldn't dribble.
Didn't
And
dribble. Never.
didn't, couldn't, wouldn't. Not my decision to make there on what was going on, but like, if you, I think we are all projecting her to go to the Indiana Fever. Put her next to Kelsey
hmm
Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston. That's just gonna make her better. Maybe she cuts down on 2 or 3 of the 30-foot threes per game. I don't have any real concern about her slotting in. You can run her in the off-ball sets that they run for Kelsey Mitchell. She can initiate the offense for Mitchell or for Boston or for any of the wings that they end up playing. She can throw entry passes to Melissa Smith and Aaliyah Boston. Like, I think she just slots in perfectly offensively into that offense for the Fever.
And I want to circle back to our conversation about best prospects ever. The thing is, the players that are ranked above Clark for us, best prospects ever, are forwards, bigs, wings. She is easily the best guard prospect ever. And the only prospect that you would kind of see, okay, this is kind of similar to what they're doing from an offensive standpoint was Diana Taurasi, like
Right.
2 decades ago. 2 decades ago. It's been that long since we've seen a player that really plays like this. And even Diana wasn't like she didn't have this usage. She wasn't doing this.
Yeah, Diana never scored over. I don't know if Diana scored even 20 points a game in college. She was just filling her role in the offense, and she also played on significantly better teams than Caitlin's been on. Like, when you play multiple seasons next to Sue Bird, who's one of the 5 best point guard prospects that we've looked at, it's just there's a whole lot that Caitlin is being asked to carry, and she's doing it at a absolutely remarkable level. And she's been doing it at a remarkable level since her freshman year when she was in the race for National Player of the Year with Paige Beckers. It's never slipped. She's just gotten better, and she averaged 27 points a game and 7 assists a game as a freshman. I She's up to 33 points a game and 8.5 assists. She's carrying a historic offensive load, and she's still at a 60% effective field goal percentage, which is like, that's what you see from a lot of big prospects that take shots only within 5 feet of the rim. I just don't know. I don't know what else you can say about her offensive game.
And after the break, we'll talk about what she does on defense. But first, here's a word from our sponsor. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting on the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you that with players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see what Josh has picked for us on this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Pick of the Week. If you're looking for value, Utah forward Taylor Hendricks is a good play after the Utah Jazz's moves at the deadline. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED lights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your car needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligibility items only. Exclusions apply. I'm your host, Hunter Cruse, and before we get back into our conversation on Clark, I want to inform you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So, like we covered in segment 1, Clark has the largest offensive offensive load in the country. And with that, it's brought some major defensive concerns or inconsistencies at that. Sometimes she doesn't attack closeouts. She doesn't uh, get down in defensive stance. For you, Lincoln, when you watch her defense, do you think, like you mentioned earlier, is it a can't, won't, or just like it? Where are you at on her from that standpoint?
I think that her freshman year, she especially was in a position where she didn't want to play defense. That is mostly changed. She's really grown, defending in space especially. She's 6 foot, 6'1", with really good instincts. So she's never going to be a great defender, I don't think, especially if she continues to carry such an absurd offensive load. Um, you know, there's kind of an inverse relationship between offensive load and defensive effort, you'd say, which is one of the things that makes Juju Watkins' freshman season so ridiculous this year, is that she's putting up absurd defensive playmaking numbers while also carrying a similar offensive load. But Caitlin has really improved sliding with drivers, keeping them in front. She's never going to be the person that you take and you throw on the other team's first option as a defensive stopper, but she has reached the point where I don't think that she's necessarily a liability. She's long, she's strong enough to hang with twos and threes, and she's firmly in the do your job zone for me. If she can just hang with the second or third best perimeter player for the other team, it would take a tremendous amount of defensive ineptitude for her to cancel out the value she brings as an offensive player.
Yeah, I think we entered the season by saying that Clark was a better prospect on the defensive end than Beckers. Obviously now, Paige is easily the best defender of the two with really high upside there. For Clark, even at the greatest degree where we've seen a player that just could not defend at all, with Diana Taurasi leading a championship team in scoring, like teams have done it. Even if she isn't good, or if the worst case scenario, like I think she's still, maybe it's a little bit different in the modern era, trying to build your entire team around a player that couldn't defend at all. But I think if she's just average, slightly below average on the defensive end, I think you're kind of good there. Like you mentioned, you don't want her defending at the point of attack with that usage. I'm interested to see how much her usage does scale down, though. I think she'll still run a pretty high usage, but I think overall she shouldn't be awful on that end.
Yeah, and a big difference there is, unlike someone like Trae Young, she's never going to be the smallest player on the floor, and she's not like a scrawny going to get bullied by even point guards and twos. She's a good size for a WNBA guard, and that's one of the reasons that we view her as more of a Luka Doncic type prospect than a Trae Young. Is like, Luka's not a good defender, but he doesn't get picked on the same way that Trae Young does because he's 6'7" and not 6'1". And if Caitlin was 5'7" instead of 6'1", it'd be a totally different conversation. But she's 6'1", she is long, and she's not going to be asked to guard the best player on the other team.
Yeah, I think the thing with Luka that helps him out so much is just the strength.
Yep.
And we'll see if Caitlin can kind of build up that, because I know teams are gonna go after her defensively, even if she's not a total liability. If she's the worst defender on the court, like it's gonna be in Indiana, I think she'll probably be fourth or fifth worst defender on the court. So from that standpoint, kind of have to go at her. But after the break, we'll get into the fit with Indiana. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Where she's at on our board, very very high, shocker where she's at there, and then we'll get into a little bit more after that. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer and from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to the IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/booth. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. As we've mentioned, if Caitlin Clark enters this year's draft, she is pretty much, no doubt, from everything we've heard, no doubt number one pick in this year's draft, especially if Paige goes back to school. So, would this fit in Indiana? After you saw the draft lottery and everything, do you think Indiana was the ideal team to get this number one pick for Caitlin Clark's future moving forward?
I think it's a great fit. Ideal is a strong word, but I absolutely think that it's a great fit. They're going to be building for a while. They're in the middle of a rebuild, but they have a ton of really fun pieces. Like putting Caitlin Clark with Aaliyah Boston for the foreseeable future is basically an ideal scenario to me. Because they're both such unique and fun players, and to put them on the court together it's absolutely incredible. I love that idea. I love that that's the future that we're going to get if she comes out this year. And I think that's an absolute win for WNBA fans everywhere.
I think what would benefit Caitlin the most with Indiana, I think, is just the infrastructure in general. I think they have a good understanding of having young players around. Like we've seen, they brought Lynn Dunn in. Just in general, I think this is a really good organization. And to have that, to have other young players, having her alongside Melissa Smith, these players are really going to benefit from just having a point guard that can draw so much gravity. Because we saw it at South Carolina. It was the whole, okay, Aaliyah Boston, you're going to double her. You're going to dig in the post. You can't do that if you have Caitlin Clark running off a screen.
Kelsey Mitchell and
Kelsey Mitchell, all plus shooters for their side, for their position easily. You have all that. What are you going to do?
Yeah, it turns them into an absolute must-watch League Pass team this summer. If you have Aaliyah Boston getting to work one-on-one in the post, which she hasn't really been able to do since her sophomore year at South Carolina. If you have just Caitlin Clark freeing up Kelsey Mitchell and Melissa Smith to work one-on-one, you're going to be creating advantages for teammates, no matter who has the ball and no matter who the play is for. It's going to be incredible to watch. Very fun.
Yeah, so thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Join the team at the next week for continued coverage of women's college basketball. Make your second listen Locked On Sports today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Have a great rest of your weekend, everyone.